Friends, there are hours when the soul taps the glass of ordinary life, and the room you've called me suddenly feels too small. Your routines still function, but something older and wiser begins to breathe through the cracks. If you are hearing that breath now, take heart. You are not breaking down, you are breaking open. First sign you no longer trust the mask, the roles that once won applause. Good worker, agreeable friend, competent adult start to feel like borrowed clothing. This discomfort is grace in rough fabric. The psyche is inviting you from performance to presence, from pleasing to becoming. The moment the mask slips, the face beneath can learn to speak. There comes a moment when the familiar ground of the personality gives way, and what rises to meet you is not an enemy from outside, but a long, forgotten figure within. This encounter often feels unsettling, even threatening, because it calls into question the image of yourself you have so carefully constructed. For years, perhaps decades, you have shown the world a face that seems consistent, admirable, and coherent. Yet beneath that surface lies another presence, composed of everything you have exiled, denied, or dismissed. It is not an invention of the mind, but a fact of the psyche. When it finally steps forward, the meeting is unavoidable. The first reaction is almost always resistance. One wants to say, "This cannot be me." You recoil at seeing traits in yourself you once condemned in others: envy, bitterness, a hunger for power, or a capacity for cruelty. To admit these forces belong to you feels like betrayal of your chosen identity, but to deny them is to remain divided, to walk only as half a human being. This figure at the threshold is not demanding submission, it is demanding recognition. Until you learn to acknowledge it, it will work against you in secret, projecting itself onto others, stirring conflict, and sabotaging your attempts at peace. You may notice it first in small irritations. The colleague whose arrogance offends you, the friend whose selfishness enrages you, the stranger whose weakness disgusts you. All these encounters may be mirrors, reflecting the qualities you refuse to own. The psyche is ruthless in its pedagogy. It will place before you, again and again, the very qualities you would rather not see until you finally recognize their origin. What seems like a flaw in the world may, in fact, be a messenger sent to remind you of the hidden chambers within your own being. To turn toward this figure is an act of courage. It means stepping into a dialogue with what you fear most, your own unlived possibilities. Darkness is only frightening when kept at a distance. When you bring it near, it begins to speak with a different voice. What once seemed like pure malice reveals itself as energy, passion, and vitality that had been locked away. Rage, when understood, becomes strength of conviction. Envy can point toward unlived desires that, if acknowledged, could enrich your path. Even your cruelty may contain within it a precise perception, a sharpness of vision that, if tempered by compassion, can cut through falsehoods and illusions. This process is never comfortable. The ego feels threatened, for it senses the loss of control. Yet this is precisely what growth demands, that control yield to balance. Integration is not destruction. It does not mean giving in to every impulse or indulging every shadowy urge. Rather, it is a reconciliation, a recognition that wholeness requires both light and dark. To deny one side is to live in partiality. To accept both is to step closer to authenticity. The world itself offers support in this work. You will notice that, as you turn inward, events in outer life seem to respond. Relationships shift. Conflicts that once seemed purely external now appear as symbols, carrying meaning about your inner state. Life, in this sense, conspires with the soul. What you encounter outwardly mirrors the drama unfolding within, guiding you toward deeper self-knowledge. At first, the shadow figure seems wild, dangerous, and unruly, but as you extend the hand of recognition, it begins to change shape. What looked like a monster becomes a wounded child. What appeared as hostility reveals itself as longing. These discoveries soften the heart and widen the horizon of compassion, not only for yourself but for others, for if you can forgive the darkness in your own depths, you can also forgive it when it appears in another. This shift is liberation. The judgments that once bound you loosen, and a new freedom arises. No one completes this work in a single gesture. It is a lifelong dialogue, a series of encounters, sometimes painful, often humbling, but always fruitful. Each time you face what you once rejected, you recover a fragment of lost vitality. Over years, these fragments gather into a larger pattern, forming a more complete and resilient self. The figure that once haunted you as an adversary becomes an ally. Its energies enrich your creativity, its insights deepen your wisdom, and its presence grants you the power to stand firmly in both light and darkness. And so the paradox unfolds. By admitting what is darkest in yourself, you make room for what is brightest. By meeting the stranger within, you begin to feel at home in your own being. The shadow is not the end of your journey, it is the beginning. It is the threshold through which every true transformation must pass. When you step across it, you no longer cling to an image of perfection. Instead, you live in truth, with all its contradictions, tensions, and depths. Only then can life become fully alive, fully human, and fully your own. There are seasons in a person's inner life when the night becomes unusually eloquent. Sleep does not simply restore the body, it opens a chamber where images surge forward with an authority greater than reason. These are not the fleeting fragments of a tired brain, but patterns charged with meaning, shapes that seem older than the individual, yet freshly alive in the dreamer's own depths. One notices them repeating: circles, mandalas, journeys through labyrinths, encounters with strangers of peculiar gravity. Such images do not arise by accident. They are the psyche's way of announcing a shift, a movement toward a more encompassing order of the self. The circle is among the most insistent of these forms. Again and again it returns, sometimes as a wheel, a sun, a ring of dancers, a halo, or simply a shape drawn in the sand. Its language is unmistakable. The psyche is striving for wholeness. A circle encloses, unites, and balances. Where the waking ego feels split, pulled in conflicting directions, the dream draws a mandala to show that beneath the division lies an impulse toward integration. The ego may not yet know how to bring harmony, but the image declares that harmony is possible. The symbol appears not as decoration but as instruction. The journey is another recurring theme. One dreams of walking a winding path, entering forests, crossing rivers, or descending into caverns. Often these landscapes are unfamiliar, yet they carry a deep sense of inevitability, as though the dreamer has always known them. The journey is never linear. It turns back on itself, demands detours, presents obstacles. This is the psyche's reminder that growth is not a straight ascent, but a spiral, circling closer to a hidden center. At times the dreamer meets guides, animals, wise figures, even threatening presences. Each one is a fragment of the larger self, waiting to be encountered, feared, or befriended. When such dreams cluster, one must pay attention. The psyche does not waste its images. If the same symbols arise repeatedly, it is because something essential presses for recognition. They announce that the soul is preparing to reorganize itself around a deeper center. What has been neglected or pushed aside seeks inclusion. What has been one-sided yearns for balance. This is the labor of individuation, the slow unfolding of the personality toward its own inherent design. To live through this stage is both exhilarating and disquieting. The familiar categories of life, the roles, duties, ambitions, lose their absolute grip. One senses that something larger than personal preference is at work. The dream, with its strange authority, points to an order more profound than the ego's plans. Often the individual resists, insisting on remaining who he or she has always been. yet the psyche is patient. It will return night after night with its messages, reshaping the imagination until resistance softens. The mandala, in particular, carries a healing force. Many who are inwardly divided find themselves compelled to draw or contemplate circular forms. Without formal teaching, they begin to sketch patterns of symmetry, sometimes with radiant colors, sometimes with stark simplicity. This impulse arises from the unconscious as a way of restoring balance. It is as though the inner world knows the medicine required and prescribes it in symbolic form. To attend to such images with reverence is to participate in one's own healing. There is also a sacred quality to these dreams. They do not flatter, they command, they invite the dreamer into a dialogue with something greater, something that transcends individual will yet unfolds within the individual soul. The figures and symbols belong not only to personal history, but to the timeless storehouse of human experience. In meeting them, the dreamer touches a current of meaning shared by countless generations. This contact with the archetypal is transformative. It enlarges the horizon, making personal struggles part of a greater story of becoming. It is important not to dismiss these dreams as curiosities or reduce them to trivial explanations. Their power lies precisely in their mystery. They carry more wisdom than the conscious mind can at first grasp. To approach them with humility, to write them down, to ponder their imagery, is to allow the psyche to speak in its own language. In time, connections reveal themselves. The circle in the dream mirrors a need for unity in waking life. The journey reflects the stage of inner development. The stranger embodies a disowned potential. Each insight, however small, strengthens the dialogue between conscious and unconscious. As this process unfolds, one begins to sense a center emerging, not the brittle center of ego control, but a deeper axis around which life organizes itself. The dreams are like lanterns illuminating the path toward this center. They remind the dreamer that the self is not a fragment lost in chaos, but a whole seeking realization. To heed these symbols is to move from fragmentation toward harmony, from disorientation toward meaning. Thus, the intensification of archetypal dreams is not a passing oddity. It is a sign that life itself is preparing you for a new stage. The psyche is gathering its scattered parts, urging you toward the completeness that has always been your secret inheritance. To walk with these symbols, to let them teach you, is to accept the invitation to become what you truly are. And in that acceptance lies both the challenge and the gift of transformation. There are times in life when the boundary between the inner and outer world seems to grow porous, when events in the environment align so precisely with one's secret thoughts or emotions that explanation by chance feels inadequate. A book falls into your hands at the very moment you are wrestling with its theme. A stranger speaks a sentence that answers a question you had not dared to utter aloud. A symbol encountered in a dream the night before appears again in the street the next day. Such moments do not fit into the neat order of cause and effect, yet they carry the undeniable weight of meaning. They are encounters with the mysterious law that binds psyche and world together. At first one dismisses them as curiosities, coincidences not worth reflection. But when they cluster, when they appear with persistence and a sense of urgency, they demand attention. The soul, it seems, has enlisted the world as its messenger. What you carry within, often unacknowledged or still half-formed, finds an echo in outer reality. The inner movement and the external event converge, and the result is not only startling but guiding. One senses that life is trying to say something, to direct one's gaze toward a path otherwise overlooked. These events are not designed to flatter the ego. They rarely coincide with the wish for comfort or superficial desire. Instead, they tend to reveal the deeper necessity of your life, that authentic trajectory which perhaps you have neglected or resisted. They come as a summons, reminding you that you are part of a larger pattern whose order is not always accessible to the rational mind. It is as if the world itself conspires with your own becoming, arranging signs at the crossroads where you might otherwise hesitate or turn away. To live without noticing these occurrences is to move through existence half asleep. Yet to become obsessed with them, to read omen into every detail, is equally misguided. The task is a balance, to remain alert, open, receptive, without surrendering discrimination. One must ask, why does this moment strike me as charged with meaning? What in my own depths is calling forth this reflection? The event alone is not the message. The meaning emerges in the dialogue between outer happening and inner readiness. Without the inner question, the outer sign would be meaningless. Without the outer sign, the inner question might remain forever unspoken. In such moments, the psyche reveals its participation in a larger field. You are not merely a solitary individual, locked in private struggle, but a participant in an unfolding reality where inner and outer correspond. This awareness can be disorienting, for it challenges the reigning belief that life is governed only by mechanical chains of cause. But it also brings relief, for it suggests that the world is not indifferent. Instead, it moves in harmony with the deeper truth of your soul, offering guidance through symbols and convergences. The feeling that accompanies such events is unmistakable, a sense of awe, of being addressed. It is not like solving a puzzle, it is more like being recognized. The world suddenly feels intimate, as though it knows you. That recognition often carries with it a responsibility. To ignore it is to fall back into dullness, to continue playing out roles that no longer fit. To respond is to step onto a path where your actions align more closely with the necessity of your own nature. These experiences are particularly common during periods of transition, when the old life has lost its vitality, but the new has not yet fully appeared. At such thresholds, one is especially sensitive, especially porous, and the psyche seizes the opportunity to communicate through outer circumstance. A door closes, another opens at the precise moment you had begun to wonder about change. Someone departs just as you discover your own independence. The pattern is unmistakable. Life is weaving together the inner and the outer into a coherent whole. The skeptic may still say it is only chance, a mind desperate for order imposing design upon chaos. Yet those who have lived through these moments know their peculiar texture. The resonance is too exact, the timing too piercing. The significance is not imposed afterward, but felt immediately, with a certainty that resists argument. It is as though the event carries within it a numinous quality, a shining from another level of reality, reminding us that the world is layered with meaning we cannot fully measure. The proper attitude is not credulity, but reverence. To bow before such experiences does not mean to abandon reason. It means to recognize that reason is not the only organ of knowledge. There is also intuition, symbol, resonance. By cultivating attentiveness to these, you deepen the dialogue between yourself and the cosmos. You discover that your life is not an isolated fragment, but a verse in a poem being spoken through time. When these convergences guide you toward greater authenticity, you sense that you are no longer wandering blindly. The outer world and the inner psyche move together like two hands of the same body, shaping your destiny. You begin to trust that even in confusion there is a pattern, even in chance there is meaning. And in that trust you walk more steadily, more truthfully, upon the path that has always been yours. There comes a moment when the costume you have worn for so long begins to tear at the seams. The polished image, the agreeable role, the mask that once fit so naturally suddenly feels unbearable, too narrow for the life pressing to emerge. Perhaps for years you played the part of the competent worker, the reliable friend, the loyal citizen, the patient spouse. These roles served their purpose. They allowed you to move in society, to earn its recognition, to belong. But beneath them, something older and truer has been waiting, and now it refuses to remain hidden. The persona cracks, and through the fracture the deeper voice makes itself heard. At first, this rupture feels like failure. You may interpret it as weakness or loss of direction. Why can't I simply be satisfied with what others seem to accept? Why do I feel restless in the very life I worked so hard to build? But these questions are not signs of deficiency, they are signs of awakening. The tension you feel is not a collapse but an emergence. What presses forward is not the ruin of your life, but its deeper foundation, the call of your own nature that can no longer be confined within borrowed forms. The world, of course, will not understand. Society thrives on personas. It needs people to act their parts consistently so the collective machinery can run smoothly. To step out of one's role, to say this is no longer enough, provokes resistance from family, from colleagues, even from yourself. Yet what choice remains? To cling to the mask once it has cracked is to suffocate. The truth is that the mask was never the whole of you. It was a useful mediation between self and world, but it cannot substitute for the living center. The force behind this upheaval often feels like an inner presence, something both intimate and other. It does not speak with the voice of external authority, but neither does it ask your permission. It compels. It insists. At times it feels like a burden, at times like a gift, but always like necessity. This is the inner vocation, the daimon that guards your unfolding, the mysterious core that demands your life serve not imitation, but authenticity. You can ignore it for a time, but at great cost: depression, emptiness, a sense of being estranged from yourself. To heed it, on the other hand, is to enter the risk of transformation. One of its first demands is reconciliation of opposites. For the mask thrived on one-sidedness. It chose certain traits to display: competence, cheerfulness, reason, virtue, and buried their counterparts in shadow. But the daemon requires wholeness. It does not allow you to rest in being only light or only darkness, only strong or only gentle, only rational or only instinctive. It presses you to carry both. You begin to notice the qualities you disowned returning with new insistence. The timid man must find his courage. The assertive woman must learn her tenderness. The one who relied on intellect must listen to intuition. The one who hid behind service must discover the dignity of desire. This reconciliation is not achieved by blending everything into a vague neutrality. It is a tension, a polarity that must be endured. To live between opposites is difficult, for the ego prefers clear definitions. Yet the greater life unfolds precisely in that tension. Out of it emerges a deeper balance, not by eliminating the poles, but by holding them both without being torn apart. In this crucible, the true individuality is forged, not the social identity, but the soul that can speak in its own voice. The path is not without pain. Old certainties fall away, relationships shift, ambitions dissolve, but alongside the loss is a strange liberation. When you no longer cling to the mask, you discover new energies rising from within. Creativity awakens, intimacy deepens, even solitude becomes companionable. What once felt like collapse reveals itself as expansion. The space left by the cracked persona is filled by something more enduring, a life aligned with its own inner law. Those who undergo this passage often feel at first as if they are alone, exiled from the world they once knew, but gradually they come to recognize that this very exile is initiation. The daemon does not lead one into comfort, it leads one into truth. And in that truth lies a deeper belonging, not merely to the expectations of others, but to the rhythm of one's own soul, and beyond that, to the larger pattern of existence itself. When the mask cracks and the deeper vocation rises, the question is no longer how to preserve appearances, but how to live authentically. and authenticity always requires carrying the opposites within you, refusing to let one destroy the other. In that struggle, in that reconciliation, you discover the center that is neither mask nor role, but the living source from which your life has always flowed. To serve that source is difficult, but it is also freedom. And once you have tasted it, you will not willingly return to the prison of the mask. Friends, the best stage of your life is not a destination with fireworks, it is a center coming awake. It begins the moment you treat your shadow as a teacher, your dreams as maps, your coincidences as conversation, and your heart as a trustworthy compass. Then the world will not simply be a place you survive, it will be a text you can read, a partner you can dance with, a sacred conversation you can finally answer. So here is the door, on one side, the old room with familiar air. On the other, the larger house that has always been yours. Take the handle, turn it, step through, and when you do, when you start living from the center rather than the mask, you will discover that life itself has been waiting, like a patient musician, for you to arrive. The orchestra is already tuned, the baton is already lifted. All it asks now is your first fearless note.